inside, so they survived. And those are the ones that Pari used here. The Kanoi Reb Shimon from here, Reb Shimon said, Kosher Sheba Mitzrayim Areik. Kosher means a good one, a good from the Mitzrayim. You should kill. Teib Sheba Nechoshem, and the same thing, the best snake, let's say it says Mechei. You should break his brain. Is Lachure ganz nicht verstandig. So here Rashi, we also don't understand. Chotz Pirish Rashi is gemeint, und es darf zum Ankommen auf viele Gottlich wie Yisrael, even though Rashi is made for every person, even for the greatest people, and they also have to come on to Rashi. Because the far is the Psak Din b'negei shnai mikevech targum. That's why there's a din that when you're ma'aver the Sedre every week and you say twice the posik in Chumash and once in Targum, so the din is as Yireh Shamayim Yikra Targum v'gam Pirish Rashi. Yireh Shamayim should read the Targum and also Rashi. So Rashi is made even for the greatest people, for everybody. He's the Geret Film but nevertheless, the Rebbe, I said many times, Pirish Rashi of Chumash is the Geret Film Pirish Rashi of Chumash zugepasst auf verstandig ich war am Chumash Mikro. The Pirish Rashi is made to be understood, and it fits even to a 5-year-old child, because it says in Pirkei Avos, a 5-year-old child starts learning Chumash. So Rashi tells the 5-year-old child the pshat in the Chumash. When you're neifen, as a verstehen pshuter the mikro la mitose, and in such a way that to understand the simple pshat truthfully, darfen nicht onkommen zu noch meforshim und so weiter. You don't have to come on to other meforshim. Rashi gibt him als the pashtus pirushe lechosher dover v'leyitur. Whatever that is negated to the simple pshat, Rashi gives him. Rashi doesn't miss anything to explain and doesn't say anything extra. And Rashi does it al asar. On the posik, Rashi makes it clear that whatever is needed in Pshuto Shel Mikra, you'd understand from the words that Rashi says, or in the Pirush Rashi was learned fear, or you'll understand it by something that Rashi already said before. But not that Rashi wrote it in a way that you still don't understand the pshat, and you have to come on before him to explain what Rashi meant. Based on that, is an since the question we asked before is a very simple one. As either which is something that even a 5-year-old will think of. So how does Rashi bring the saying of Reb Shimon that the best of the Mitzrim you should kill, and not adding any explanation of the kasha we had, which any child will ask. And as we said, Rashi writes his Pirish that it will be understood. It seems like it's not understood here. Rashi writes something that's not understood, and Rashi doesn't answer it. No, it's even harder. A child that learns Chumash already learned before, and as we said, the child that learns Chumash doesn't know anything that he's going to learn further later. But whatever he learned before in Chumash or Rashi, he remembers. So he remembers what he learned as when Avram Avinu is given in Mitzrayim. And Avram was in Mitzrayim, hat Pari Meite given zu Avram. Und ihm weggeschickt von dort mit der Kavonne zu verhitten und Sorge für schlecht. The Pari was good to Avram, and he sent him away from Mitzrayim because he wanted to protect him and Sorge from any harm that the Mitzrayim could do. So we see that there is Mitzrayim which are good. Noch mehr davon hat gelernt. The child, or anybody who learns Chumash, learned even more. When the children came to settle in Mitzrayim, hat Pare allein mit seinem eigenen Willen vorgelegt zu besetzen, sie mit der Worte. Pare on his own will offered that they should settle in the best of the land, which is in Goshen. These as they besetzen sich is given in Eifen with the Posek that zählt, and the settling was in such a way as the Posek says, they settled there and they multiplied there. In other words, it was good, and Pare did something very good. So Pare is a Mitzri, and he was a good person. How could you say that the best of the Mitzrayim you should kill, because me gefind, as es eine gewinner solche Mitzrayim, was haben sich was zeigen zu ihnen, wie es darf zu sein. Since we find that there were Mitzrayim that behaved to the Yidden the way it's supposed to be. They lived the Shalva lived to them in peace. Other Rabbi Meitikin, not only did they live to them in peace, it didn't harm them. They were good to them. So we see not every Mitzri is bad. And here it says that the best Mitzri you have to kill. By this child who's learning Chumash, the kasha will get even greater when we get to Parsha Kiseitze. Now, the Rebbe doesn't mean that Rashi here has to answer a question that will come up from Parsha Kiseitze, because as the klal is, Rashi only answers things in this posik. If there's a problem in this posik and a later posik, he will explain in the later posik. But Lepel, the Rebbe says that when you will get to Parsha Kiseitze, there will be a kasha. Was kommt zu Atzivim Mafurish, there the Torah makes a very clear tzivut. Lei sesayev mitzri. It was, don't start up with a mitzri. Don't be nasty to a mitzri. As is an isur, so nor afil a mesayev zayin a mitzri. It's an isur, not only have to hurt him, even to be metayev him. But avodah needs to hargen him, and certainly not to kill him. So how could the pasuk here say that, where Rashi explains, that the best mitzri you have to kill? Also, if the best mitzvah you have to kill, so how could we fulfill after the pasuk speaks that I'm not bothering a mitzvah? The pasuk continues. A third generation could come into marrying a Jewish woman. In other words, if a mitzvah is megayer, so he cannot marry a Jewish woman. He could only marry another mitzvah that's megayer. Then the next generation too. The third generation already could marry into the regular Jewish nation. So here it says that you could. The truth is, if it's a ger of a Mitzrayim that comes to convert, shows that he's a good Mitzri. Reb Shimon says even the best Mitzri you have to kill. So how could you fulfill the sin of having him a third generation when the first Mitzri comes to Mabaya, he shouldn't let him. It says here the best Mitzri you have to kill. So they'll never get to the third generation. So that's a contradiction from this posik to that posik there. And since there's a contradiction, Rashi at least should have answered it in Parsha Kisoitze. So the Rebbe continues. Einer von den Terutzen, was mir gefunden nach Sach Sforim, is one of the answers brought in many Sforim. It's like this. Mesichta Seifrim is the Girse. Mesichta Seifrim says the same thing, but there are different Girse. There it says Hatev Sheba'akum B'shas Milchama Hareg. The best guy during the war, you should kill him, which means this that you're able to, or maybe it even means you should kill the best guy. It's only said when he is at war with the Eden. Not in any other situation. When there's no war, certainly it's not only not war, but it's a peaceful time. That's not what it meant. So there the gears is that it's referring to the time of war. So maybe that's what we can learn Pshat in Rashi. When he said the best Mitzri you have to kill, that's only when the Mitzrayim are at war with the Eden. From das was the Yore Dvar Hashem is demelt nanish geworden, because at this point, the one that gave the cattle, the behemoths to fight, to chase after the Eden, was punished. He says, vorgekommen, when the Mitzrayim haben noch gejagt die Eden, bekommen zu halten mit sie beim Yamsuf. That it was a time when the Mitzrayim were fighting with the Eden. In other words, what Asher says, the best Mitzri you have to kill. And what was he referring to? Here we see that the best Mitzri, the good ones, gave their cattle to chase the Eden. It was a wartime. They were trying to make wage war with Eden. So that's what Rashi says, that at the time of war, just like over there by this case, at the time of war, the best Mitzri was bad and he deserved to die. So anytime when the Mitzrayim the Goyim are at war with Eden, then even the good ones you have to kill. So maybe that's what Rashi means. So the kasha is not so bad. It's not just killing any Mitzri. Rashi is pshat. In pshat, in that derech pshat, you can't learn that's what Rashi means. While Rashi says like this, from here, from this case of these people who were Yored Var Hashem, that they also died by Kriyas Yamsuf. From here we know, Reb Shimon said, that the good Mitzri you should also kill, which means, number one, as von dannen lernt man if anders. From here we learn out someplace else. So it's not only gay here at the time the way it's here. We learn that from someplace else. And mikan von dem vayikach gei merecha Mitzrayim. And what Rashi says is, from here, from this case where they took the chariot of Mitzrayim, von der Passierung von dem Nemen. Here, they took the chariots from these good Mitzrayim, so to speak. Wie bald, als der Yore ist Dvar Hashem von den Mitzrayim, hat gegeben seine Behemoth zu Parei. From here it mashma, that since the Yore Dvar Hashem from the Egyptian gave the Behemoth to Parei, is so lieb them, is wert given dem Einish, but the Rebbe should have him gebracht, b'shas Kriyas Yamsuf Harei. Because he gave the animals, that's why he would deserve to die, like it happened at Kriyas Yamsuf, that all these people died. So what did they die for? For giving their behemoths to Parei to chase the Eden. Das heißt, it means, An eine Schmiss hat ihm gekommen, nicht mit Zad sein Milchome bepel mit Yidden. The fact that these people deserve to die is not because they actually waged war against the Yidden. Nor zu dem allein was gegeben, die Behemoth zu Pare mit der schlechte Kavone. Only because he gave this to the Behemoth to Pare with this bad intentions. Noch vor der Shas Milchome, before the war, noch jeder Pare und die Mitzrayim seien an eine Milchome bepel mit Yidden. Before they went into Milchome. When they took it, they were still in Mitzrayim. They weren't fighting with the Yidden. And from Rashi is mashmer that from here we see that the best mitzvah you have to kill. From what here? From here that these good, so to speak, Mitzrayim gave their cattle to Pare to be able to chase the Yidden. And for that they deserve to die. And from there we learn out other places the same. So it comes out that it's not because of the war. If the reason we'd say they died is because they went to fight. So we see even the good Mitzri during the war is no good and you got to kill them. But here it wasn't because they went to war. So obviously it's not because of the war. So we're just saying any good mitzri you have to kill. And the question comes back, what does that pshat? Any good mitzri you have to kill? And you can't say Rasha means like the sicha seifrim. It means because he's in the middle of war, because they weren't in war. What they did, what they deserved to die, was not because of the war. Then Rebbe goes weiter. Rebbe said maybe we could say that the fact they gave the cattle, the behemoths to Pare, is also considered as part of the war. You could say that because this was given in order to fight, so this is considered that they're also part of the war. For another reason, for a stronger reason, the main reason why we can't say Rasha means that you should only kill a Mitzri, b'shas, even a good Mitzri, b'shas is at war. For a different reason, we can't say that's what Rasha means. Because as we said before, Rasha geschrieben sein Pirish Echvar ben Chomesh. Rasha wrote this Pirish even for a 5-year-old child. Und der Rebbe is canal, therefore, as we said before, alles was is nötig Pshuta Shlomikra, Rasha geschrieben, Poshet und Klor. Everything that's negated to the Pshat, Rasha wrote it very clear. Therefore, if Rasha would mean that when he says the best mitzvah he should kill, means at the only time of war, he would have said it very clearly in his commentary. He wouldn't rely that the child who's learning doesn't understand, will search and find it in the Sicha Sofrim, another Girsa, and say, oh, this is probably what Rasha meant. Rasha doesn't do that. So if Rasha would mean that, he would write clearly, Teiv Shebi Mitzrayim, or Shebi Mitzrayim, B'shas Mochama, he would put in these words. Especially, it's not just in order to understand the Pshat. It's a real condition. According to this Pshat, it's only then that you do it. So Rashi would have had to make it clear. So therefore, we can't learn like this. So now the Rebbe continues. High time is, since we just said that whatever Rashi meant has to be very clear. So because of that, is eich schwer einzulernen and the andere Terutzim was werden gebracht in Svarim. It's hard to say the other answers that Svarim say, and as the Rebbe will give a list of a few answers, a few examples, that you can't say that's what Rashi meant, because if Rashi would mean those answers, those shotim, he would have said it clearly. L'moshel, Rebbe says. For instance, number one answer is, as the Pirush for Reb Shimon's Klal meant, that the meaning of Reb Shimon's rule, that you have to kill the best of the Mitzrayim, means nicht as the kosher Mitzrayim is wert dem Einish von Hareg. It doesn't mean that the best of the Mitzrayim, deserves to die. Hareg means kill him. Nor a file a kosher Mitzrayim is azav was zokt Hareg. That's the Lashon. Teiv Mitzrayim, the best Mitzri, Hareg, not that you kill him, will always say kill, which means B'shas handelt sich wegen Mishpat Nachete, was is verdächtigt in the Tziche, when you're judging a sinner who you suspect that maybe he murdered somebody, but you don't know. Is der kosher Mitzrayim greitum zu vermishpeten zum Teit Hareg, even the best of the Mitzrayim, is ready to judge him that he deserves to die, just on an assumption, without the proper investigation to find maybe merits that he doesn't deserve to die. Every guy, the best one, will always say, if it's a question whether he deserves to die, yes, he should die. Schenke by Yidden is the Seder, by Yidden the opposite. Seder is V'shoftei again Mitzilei, by Yidden that says in Pasuk that when the Bezdin judges, they have to look for reasons to kill him, but they have to at the same time find reasons not to kill him. As es fordert sich Eidim und Hasra b'chulu. First, you have to have witnesses, proper witnesses. You have to have warned him before. You have to find merits that he doesn't deserve to die. And that's what this pshat says is the pshat in the words, Teiv Sheba Mitzrayim says Hareg always. That's one pshat. Another pshat. That when it says the best mitzvah you have to kill is only an exaggeration, which is al derech with their pirish and hemshach from the Shimon's maimed. It's similar to what the Shimon continues his statement. There is Mesichta Sofrim. He continues. He says like this. He says a few things. He said the best mitzvah you should kill. The best woman does black magic. What does he mean with that? Certain chas v'sholom to say on the Jewish woman, the daughter of Risora, Rivka Racham Leah. We're talking about the good ones of them, as Isabalas Kshofim, she's a magician. So what did he mean? He said it as an exaggeration. To stress a wiffel medarfim dem sein geworden, afilu b'shaychas shukteirish benoshim. How careful you have to be, even when it comes to the best woman. You always got to be very careful to see that she's not like that. So really, it didn't mean the best woman is about kshofim, but it's an exaggeration to show you how careful you have to be. Now that is there. So the same thing by kosher sheba mitzrayim hareig. According to this shah, this is what he meant when he said the best mitzvah you should kill. At the same time, it doesn't mean you have to kill them. It's an exaggeration and a strong stress. How much you cannot rely on anybody, on any of the gun. The second shot. Third shot, Gimel. In the Zeit von Reb Shimon, Mieden gelitten, Asach Zoras Gezeres zum Sein in Israel. Time Reb Shimon Yidden suffered a lot of Zoras, a lot of decrees from the Jewish enemies. Und sie hat Reb Shimon gemeint, mit seinem Maim Mekosher Sheba Mitzrayim Hareg. And those people in his time, he meant when he said the best one of Mitzrayim killed. They showed an open hatred to the Yidden. Similar to the snake, we said next to this says the best snake you should kill was his full mid gift. Why should you kill him? Because the snake always naturally has poison and he has venom against that person. So too, the Goyim at the time of Reb Shimon were so bad with their hatred to the Yidden. So that's what he meant. Oh, but I meant it Goyim Bechlal, it doesn't mean generally Goyim. It doesn't even mean Egyptians. Best proof is, we find many Mamorach Chazal where it stresses how the Eibishter had pity on the Egyptians. You see it especially in the reason why it says you shouldn't bother Mitzri, shouldn't start up with him. And the Pasuk gives a reason, because you were a ger in his land. In other words, you lived in his land, so you got to give him some respect. So we see that the Torah does speak about the goodness of the Mitzrayim. So Reb Shimon never meant that all the Mitzrayim are like that. He meant just in his time, he was talking about these people. So we have three answers given to the kasha we had before. So the Rebbe says, Odi pirush v'kolka yetzeben ishver ein teitchen pirush Rasha. These answers you can't put it into Rasha's words. But the Balze liegen nicht in Pashas am Shmores von die Werte, was Rasha bringt, kosher sheba mitzrayim hareig, since these words, this pshotim, all these three pshotim, and are not simple in the using the words of Rasha, which he says doesn't say any, doesn't say in the time of Reb Shimon, it doesn't say that what he says kill, or the other pshotim. So how could you put these words? But if Rasha would mean that, but Rasha gedarf zulegen Werte zum Avayr sein der main von kosher sheba mitzrayim hareig. If he would mean any of these three pirushim, he would have to add kosher shem tzayim hareig and explain what it means, because if he doesn't explain what it means, a person who's just learning the Rasha without knowing anything else would never look into see in Rasha these three pshotim. Hey, says Rasha tut es nicht, nor is meitig, nor the gezählte Werte von Reb Shimon, die sich stehen in Mechilte. Since Rasha does not do that, there's not anything else. It just copies the words of Reb Shimon as they are written in the Mechilte. Muslim Onemen, we have to say, der Bier von dem liegt in Reb Shimon's Werte Gufe. We must say that the answer to Rasha's question, to the question on Rasha, is in Rasha's words itself. As Rasha darf gar nicht zugeben, zu verantworten, der Kasha, afilu nicht zu Bab Mechomesh. Rasha doesn't have to add anything to answer the Shaila, even to a child of 5 years old. Now we have to know what it is. But before we get to the answer, so the Rebbe continues, von dem allem kommt man zum regressiert me in the minion. Based on what we said before, we come to a bigger kasha. Let's say we'll answer Shati Rasha from all sides. Everything will be fine. Mit dem Virus sei verwas bei beim Chomisch ist lechatchilu legamer verstandig und glad der Meimer koshish mitzrayim harei. We will explain that how lechatchilu it's understood. A child learns, 5-year-old child learns, and Rashi says the words koshish mitzrayim harei, he will understand. There's no problem. Whatever will explain that this is what Rashi said. That kosher lidach gisenavi of the kasha on the opposite side. Wie kommt es aber Meshach Deires vom Gdele Yisrael sich gemattet zu verändern die Kasche? Why is it the Gdele Yisrael had a hard time to answer the Kasche of the Goyim when they quoted this und haben sich nicht begnügen mit der Aufklärung, was Rashi hat für Ben Chomish? Why wasn't it enough? Whatever we're going to explain in Rashi, that's so simple, as we said, why didn't they answer that to the Goyim? If it's such a simple answer. Warum es ist sicher, it's clear, da wird nicht gemeint zu verändern die Scheile von der Ben Chomish mit der Hezbollah mit Yasagossi. It's not a pshat that when we're going to explain pshat in Rashi, means we're going to explain pshat that the child will accept. According to them, the child will accept. But it's aber nicht der emes beer, which really is not the real reason. The real reason we'll find later the child when he'll get older. But what we're saying, pshat in Rashi, explaining that Rashi's words contain it, that the child will understand, is according to him. And if we say that way, then the kasha that we asked why the Gdele Yisrael didn't say it, because this is only a childish answer. The pshat we're going to say that's a childish answer, but that's not true. The Rebbe says, "Chash v'sholem to sagen as Rashi learned in the Mechomesh shloi ali b'demes." That the Rashi is teaching this to a child, and it's not according to the truth. It's a childish and not a real answer, and that's why they couldn't say it. Nor gewiss is the Rashi uisen and tamobir amiti really Rashi means the real reason. And it's so simple, and that's the real reason that the Rashi doesn't have to add anything to the Mechilta. It says, even for the child, now, which is such a true teretz. It's a simple teretz, and it's a true teretz that even the child understands. So it must be a real teretz, so why didn't they answer? In all these dialogues, they did not answer whatever the Rebbe will say we're going to explain. So that's a pelle. If the explanation, such a good explanation that there is, why didn't they give them an explanation? We also have to understand another thing. Number one, Pirush Rashi is not safer to Paskin Aloch. It's not so Mafarash and the Pshat from the Ksuvim. Rashi's commentary on Chumash is not a safer to Paskin Dinim. Now he's explaining Pshat in the Psukim. So what is Bechal Negeye in Pirush Ksuvim? So in order to understand the Pshat and the Posik, why is it important? So to bring down that from here, we see came what Reb Shimon said that the best mitzvah you should kill. If Sefarent from the Kashe, in order to answer the Kashe, where they got the payments, is doch genug zu sagen, as is einen gewählt Majores war Hashem. Und nicht mehr. All Rashi had to say, Rashi has the Kashe, where did they get the payments? So Rashi could have said from those people who feared Hashem's words, and what did they do? They put their payments inside, so the payments survived. That's all. Why does Rashi have to add to that? And from here, Reb Shimon learns out that you have to kill the best mitzvah. So if Rashi would be a safer teaching us halachas or things like that, so yeah, Rashi tells us what you got to do. But Rashi is not that. Rashi is just pshat and posei. For pshat and the posei, Rashi didn't have to say it. And as we said before, Rashi doesn't say anything extra. So why does Rashi say this? Number two, Eva fil Rashi darf das Bavorenen, as if the Yored var Hashem, but need to take. Now, if Rashi has to say it, in order to answer, Rashi says that the one that feared Hashem's words also was no good. So in order to explain that, Rashi maybe has to say this, that Reb Shimon said, that to verantworten the Shaila, maybe in order to answer the question, wie kommt Ayore war Hashem, wie kommt Ayore war Hashem, geben seine Behemoths zu vielen Amalchome mit ihnen? Because the Rashi would just say the words. Where did the Behemoths come from? From the Yore var Hashem. But l'chure, that's not enough. A child or anybody who learns this says, I don't understand. If it's Yore var Hashem, it's not Shayach. How did he give it? Maybe that's the reason why Rashi says that Shimon learned out from here that the best mitzvah he could kill. That answered the question. Yes, how could the Yore var Hashem of the Mitzrayim give the behemoths to fight with the Eden? Exactly, because the best is also bad. The best ones are bad. So maybe that's why Rashi brings it. So the Rebbe is aber noch als nicht it's still not simple. Was ist negehe der Ruisfir, als wird verdem ähnlich von Hareg? Why do we need to say that the best mitzvah you have to kill? Rashi should have said, from here we see that the best mitzvah is bad. In order to answer the question why they gave, because they're also bad. They look bad, they're better than others, but they're still bad. That's what they gave. Why is it important to mention that you got to kill them? Another question, Gimel. The Hemshech we see him, Tevshech and Choshim, it says it's Meicha, the Hemshech in the end. that the best of the snakes, he should bash his brain out or whatever we'll say, certainly has no connection to the pasuk. And again, Rashi only writes things not more and not less what's negated to the pshat in the pasuk. Why does he bring this? And the fourth question, why do we need to learn from here that the best snake you have to bash his brains? It's a clear pasuk. Pasuk in Bereshis. David said, I will make a hatred between the human and the snake. And the pasuk, who yeshuv choresh. The human is going to hit the snake on the head. He's going to bite the human on the feet. So the pasuk says, who yeshuv choresh. The man breaks the head of the snake. So why do we need from here to learn now that the best snake, you have to bash his head in, his brain? So these are kashas on the teichen of the Rashi. Not such a big piece of Rashi, but so many kashas. There are more questions. Diyukim. Some are called questions, and some are diyukim. A diyuk in a word. Number one. So the welchem tam bringt the Rashi the nomen from Bala Memre Reb Shimon. Why does Rashi bring who said this statement? Reb Shimon. From the Geret kam upon him. The Montes Rashi nor down when das is massive beer in sein Pirish. Rashi only brings a name that adds explanation in the Pirish that Rashi brings. Because if Rashi would just bring it because you should bring whatever you say, B'Shem Meremer, you should bring it the name of who said it, then a lot of what Rashi writes was said by different people in Gemara, in the Midrashim, etc. Rashi doesn't bring, in most cases, Rashi doesn't bring a name. So those places where he does bring the name, obviously it's negated to the Pshat. So what's negated here to know that this was Reb Shimon? Basis, another kasha. By Kosher Mitzrayim zokte dem Loshen Hareig, and by Tev Shebenechoshim retzeites Meiche. By the best Mitzri, he says kill. Best Mitzri should kill. And by the best snake, he says retzeites Meiche, bash his brain in. Why didn't he say kill him? And that's it. A third question, Gimel, by the Loshen retzeites of Rashi L'chure gedav zogen retzeites Reishe. When he says retzeites, which break, bash his head, not his brain. Why? By Hesem to Loshen HaKosa, which then it would fit to the pasuk. The pasuk says, Hu Yeshuv Choresh. So we see that when it comes to Yeshuvcha, which means to break, it says by the snake Reish. Another pasuk it says Ratzatzto Roshe Levios. It says Ratzatzto, the same lashon is here, and it says Roshe. So why does he change Dasha from the pasuk and it says Meiche, his brain? And the fourth kasha, what is the diik Mekanoi Reb Shimon Nemer? What is the diik that from here Reb Shimon knows this din, this inyan that the best mitzri should kill? Was kommt zu Sheila sein? I can es nicht oplernen machen not afke mekan. What's Rashi trying to exclude? When Rashi says from here we know, it's because there would be a possibility to know it from someplace else. So Rashi says no, from here we know. How would we know this from someplace else? Or not how do we know, maybe from the pasuk. But what does Rashi mean when Rashi says mikan and not from someplace else? What is he trying to tell us? That here we see something that we wouldn't see someplace else. Where is that someplace else that Rashi is trying to tell us? In order to answer this, all this, you have to first bring a general shaila that you could ask on what Rashi says. Looking back, when we quoted before Masechta Sofrim, where it says the best guy during war you should kill, that makes sense. It makes sense even a simple pshat. Since the guy, the Mitzrayim at this point, came to fight, have a war with Yidden, und nicht das, was der Eibishter hat meinisch gewinnt, die Mitzrayim ist gewinnen an Eifen. For Milchame, side the Mitzrayim went to Milchame, and the Eibishter, what he did to them, he punished them, was also in the form of a war. The Pasuk says, Hashem yilochem lochem. Hashem will fight, lochem is lochem Milchame, will fight for you. And it says, Hashem nilchem lahem, they said, the Mitzrayim said Hashem is fighting for them. So it comes out that this was during war. Oh, in that case, even the child understands. When you're at war with your enemy, you can't check and see, well, this is the better guys of the enemy, this is the worst guys, and you can't make a difference. So it makes a lot of sense. So Rashi could have said it here, that since this was a time of war, and the good ones were also bad, so from here we know that when in time of war, the best guy is still no good. You can't trust the best guy. And that would be a simple pshat. Why Taka doesn't Rashi say it? Und nei Basei is the other beglatte von der Geste, was Rashi bringt von der Mechilte. This would be simpler than the way Rashi brings it for the Mechilta, where state stam kosher shemitzrayim areik. There it's a stam, a good mitzri you should kill. That's the way Rashi brings for the Mechilta. Had he brought it from Masechta Sofrim, would be much simpler. Because the way Rashi brings it was number one, das meint sie jeder Zeit am all Umständen. The way Rashi writes it, it means always under all circumstances. But das ist lagamra hepech tzedek vayeshin. That is hard to understand. That's against tzedek and yeshin, against righteous. How could you just say any time, any guy you should kill? And that's why it's mashron for Rashi. The second thing, das ist madgish, as dem Yored dvar Hashem, but kommt miese blazer fire, was gegeben seine Behemoth zu Parik now. Because the way Rashi writes it, doesn't the word B'shas Mochamed, so it's mashman that why did the people here, the one that gave the animals, the Yored dvar Hashem, why did they get killed? Nothing to do with war. Rashi doesn't mention the word war, not because of the war, because they gave their animals. And that's harder to understand. Had Rashi written the way it says in Sicha Seifrim, would have been simpler. Rashi would have said, just like here, they were fighting a war. So the best ones of the war, during the war, the best guy, the best Mitzri, deserves to die. And so you see here that these guys who went against the Eden, they went to war, they all died. So we see from here, the Rashi doesn't do that. The Rebbe says, no, in the Memes in this concussion, really, this is not a kasha. Why? In der Chabshat ist verstandig, der Ness von Kriyas Yamsuf und Vertillung von der Nochjoge der Mitzrayim. In der Chabshat, we understand that the miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf and the fact that the Mitzrayim who chased the Yidden got killed is nicht blaze machmas dem, was the Mitzrayim haben noch gejogt die Yidden mit Zimmer Choma gehalten. It's not only because of what they did now, that they were chasing the Yidden and they went to war with the Yidden. For man steht in Frier and Posik, you can't say it's for that reason only, because the Posik says, der Eibishter hat gesagt, Meishem v'chazakti es lei pare berodaf. I, the Eibishter's I, will strengthen, harden the heart of Pare and he'll chase. So you can't really say for this itself, Pare and his people were killed. Later it says in Posik, v'chazak Hashem es lei pare v'yirdei. Hashem hardened, strengthened the heart of Pare, so he chased. We bald es noch joggen, you come in der Farbe der Eibishter hat gestärkt Paris heart, and since chasing the Eden came because the Eibishter strengthened his heart, kommt doch nicht kanenisch der Far, so you can't really punish him because of that. So why did Eibishter kill them all now here by Kriyas Yamsuf? No, she's given a hemshech von die alle friedliche Makkes, that the Eibishter gebracht hat in Mitzrayim. This was all a continuation of the previous Makkes that the Eibishter brought on the Mitzrayim. So the them was the Eden gepeinlich and Shabbat give them a meshach of Zefel. They made the Eden suffer and they made them work hard for so many years. And now it's Abschluss for the alle Makkes, and as a end, a finishing of all these Makkes, so the Eibishter gebracht Gressen. Now you brought the worst, the biggest punishment, the Ness von Kriyas Yamsuf, but of them the miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf that not even one left alive. So it comes out what happened here is all in continuation to before. Und der Fall kann Rashi nicht bringen die Girse vom Sicha Sofrim, as nur B'shas Mochamed ab dem Hargen und natürlich Tev Shebakum. Therefore, Rashi can bring the Girse from Sicha Sofrim that when is this idea that the best guy even you have to kill is only during war, and that he learns out from here, you can't learn it from here. Hier ist der Posek meint nicht zu sagen, dass die Redif von Mochamed von den Mitzrayim ist gewähnt die Sibbe von Seirumkum beim Yamsuf. Because the way the Posek is, they didn't die because of what they're doing now. So you can't say from what they were doing now, and even the good ones gave their animals for what happened now, from that we learn now that the best mitzvah you have to kill at time of war. So why can't we learn out? Because here they weren't killed because of the war. As we said, because of this war itself, they wouldn't have been killed because it was not really Pare's fault. But they were killed as a hemshech to everything that they did before. So it's not because of the war. So Rashi can't say from here we learn now that B'shas Mochamed Tev Mitzrayim Harei. Now, like them is moving for was Rashi muss bringen Mekano Reb Shimon Neimer Hagam Pirish Rashi nicht can say for Allah. This explains why Rashi has to bring what Reb Shimon said, even though the Chure, the Kasha we asked before, what's negated to the Pshat and the Posik? But Reb Shimon learned out from here what people should do otherwise, other places. Because from them was Rashi sagt that die was eine gewinn Yored Dvar Hashem und gegeben sie ihre Behemoth zu Parei. Since Rashi says that those that were Yored Dvar Hashem, they gave their animals to Parei, he's moving as they seien gewinn by Kriyas Yamsuf. They gave it. They came along to Kriyas Yamsuf. It was their animals. They came to Kriyas Yamsuf. And the Rebbe brings one of the Kemis at the bottom of 42. Über Meila, als Eifel seien bestraft geworden, zusammen mit den anderen Mitzrim. That therefore, when all the Mitzrim died, and these people who saved their animals before because they were Yored Var Hashem also came along, they also died. So if that's what happened, we have to understand. Wie kommt es, was der Yored Var Hashem ist umgekommen bei Kriyas Yamsuf, zugleich mit die, was einen nicht gewähnt Yored Var Hashem? How is it possible that these people who were afraid of Hashem's words were punished and died together equally to all the other ones who were not Yored Var Hashem? The Pasuk says not one was left over, so they also died. Now, what was their problem? It's only because they gave their behemoths. Because we just finished saying that this punishment here was not because of this war that they were chasing. So why did these good guys, so to speak, die? Because they gave their behemoths. The Rebbe explains it. Had we said, not like we said before, but had we said that the reason they punished them here and they died was because of this chasing the Eden to war, we'd understand why even the Yored Var Hashem deserves this punishment. Rashi wouldn't even have to tell us. We'd understand ourselves. So why? Because they also chased. Because if they're punished and killed because they chased the Eden, and the Yored Var Hashem also chased the Eden, so they died, no question. Rashi does not say anything. But as we said before, the reason they died is not because they chased the Eden, because this is not really their fault. It's the Eibishter made it. But it was because what was happening before. Now we don't understand. So why will these also punish? The Yored Var Hashem were not the ones that worked before to make the Eden suffer, because they were Yored Var Hashem. They were afraid of Hashem. So they didn't make them suffer. So if Parei here and the rest of the guys, Mitzrayim, because of what they did before all these years, they killed them. But the Yored Var Hashem doesn't seem that they did it. They were Yored Var Hashem. But why would they die when they did not do the same thing that the people who died, other people who died, who deserved to die, and they didn't deserve that? Befrat, in their parsha, especially when the child was learning this, and as we said before, remembers everything he learned before. So he learned the parsha about Sdeim and Amera. As dorten wollten sich gefunden blaze 9 or 10 tzaddikim. The story with Avram speaking to the Eibishter, and he said, if Eibishter said, if I find 10 tzaddikim or maybe even 9, and counting the Eibishter as the 10th, wollten sie nicht nur allein geraten geworden. So not only these 10 people or 9 people themselves would have been saved, nor their schus wollt megen gewinnen auf alle Einwohner von seiner Stadt. Their schus would have protected all the people from the city. Und da ist gewesen Punkt der Hepe, hier ist das opposite. Nicht haben sie von dem Zug für Yored Var Hashem nicht megen gewinnen zu raten, wenn die anderen mit Zerayim von Kloya. Here, since the Yored Var Hashem came along with them, we're here. And they were good people. They didn't make the Eden suffer before. And nevertheless, not only did they not protect the others like by Sdeim, nor they themselves were not saved. So the question is, why did they die? If they did not do the things that caused the Eibishter to kill this Mitzrayim by Kriyas Yamsuf. So why did they die? The fire brings Rashi the Maimah from the Pshimah, Mekan, Kosher Shemitzrayim Arei, Tev Shem and Choshim. That's why Rashi brings what Reb Shimon said, that from here we see that the best of the Mitzrayim kill, the best of the snakes bashes brain. They to Masberzain to explain like this. At der Einish from the Yore is nicht given to leave them allein was gegeben seinen Behemoth so pare. To tell us that the reason why these people who were afraid of Hashem got killed, died here, is not just because they gave their animals. It's not for the war, we said, because even the pare didn't, and the others didn't die because of the war, of this war that they were chasing the Eden. It's something before. So we thought before that the reason they died seems, if you learn Porship Shad, is because they gave their animals. So is that as bad as what the other Mitzrayim did? So that's what Rashi is telling us. That's not like that. They didn't die just because they gave their animals. But their harbe einish for Yorei, the strict, the big punishment that even the one that was afraid of Hashem got is aichocha. The fact that they died proves as ein geben the behemoth is at itself and I seen it to Eden. That the reason he gave it, not just because he just, okay, I'll give it. It came as a result of their hatred to the Eden. In welchen is gleich mit the andere Mitzrayim, which was equal to the other Egyptians. But die giftige gesinne, this venom, hatred that they had, bedugma von Anochesh, like a snake, was dort bewegen alle Mitzrayim zu peinigen die Eden. azay stark and azay viel Jordan, that caused the other Egyptians to make the Eden suffer so strongly and so many years. Und was der Fahr ist, if they alle nigze geworden, dem Jore, der ähnlich von der Regel nicht that's why they got this punishment. In other words, the other ones got killed because they made the Eden work. In truth, these people maybe did not make the people work. The sin that they had were just the same. That's the proof. Sometimes you don't need a side proof. The proof is from the question itself. The question is, why did they die similar to them when they didn't participate in the same thing? The answer is, that Gufa must tell you that they did participate. Now, it doesn't mean that they dafke made the Eden work, because the Pashtas, if they're Yored Var Hashem, they probably didn't make the Eden work. But the sinner they had the same. There must be that sinner. So when they all died, all those who had the sin, so they made the Eden work because of the sinner, but these guys at least had the sinner, and that's why they died equally. Now, when you know that, now we'll understand why Shimon says the Loshem Mikan. From here we know it, that the best mitzvah you should kill. Bis dem einish from Kriyas Yamsuf is noch nicht talking Klora Bavais, because till this punishment of Kriyas Yamsuf, we don't have a clear proof. Azay Ram Yores Var Hashem is given the sin of Rishas Eden, Nansa Grace Mos, that this hatred and the riches of even the Yored Var Hashem to Eden was so great, as Im Zol Kuman the Father Eine Shareg zu gleich mit Alon Mitzrim, that he should be killed together with Mitzrim. In other words, you might think that maybe even from before, from seeing that these people, that there were, when we don't look here, when we see, can we prove that all the Egyptians had the same sin? We can't say that. Maybe some didn't, especially the Yored Var Hashem. Maybe they didn't. It's only when we get to here, when we see that even the Yored Var Hashem died together with the rest. Now we know that the best mitzri is bad. The best mitzri in Mitzrayim at those days was bad, which means this is the reason why Rasha brings, the kasha was, why does it bring Reb Shimon Bechlal? Because he's answering the question. Why did they die? So look at what Reb Shimon says. Here, we see here, and when he says he see here, the Rebbe will explain soon, it means not Lagaba another case. He's saying, from here we see the best mitzri at that time was bad. From here we see that even the Yored Var Hashem had such a great sin, the Horaya, they died. And that's what it means, that even the best deserves to die, as we see here. Those was the Makis, those were by the Makis, the fact that by the Makis, besides Dever and Borod, Gefinim Yinit, the Yore is Ozain Uzgitel from the anderen Mitzrayim. We don't find that the Yored Var Hashem was different than the rest of Mitzrayim. Is doch nicht kein Reihe, is doch kein Reihe nicht, as is von See nicht abgestanden in sein sinnerisches Eden. Still no proof that the Yored Var Hashem was the same, was not less in their hatred than the rest of the people. Weil wie bald jene Makkes eine nicht gewende größte, fuller ähnlich von Misse. Since the other Makkes was not the biggest one, they didn't cause death. Fordert sich nicht die größte full Mos Risches von Mitzrayim, doesn't need to, David should punish, you don't need the complete Rishes. In other words, maybe, since it doesn't say, let's go explain a little more. The Chura, you could say, since it doesn't say anywhere that the Yored Var Hashem was punished less than the rest, like Dam and Svardeya and Kinim and all, whatever. By most, besides Makkes Dever and Borod, it doesn't say Bechlal that the Makkah was different by the regular Mitzri and the Yored Var Hashem. So the Chura from there also you could think. So obviously they had the same hatred because they also got the Makkah. So Dever says from them it's not that high yet. The fact that they got those Makkahs, since the Makkahs were not death, maybe for the punishment, the problem of these Makkahs is enough the rishas that they had. Maybe the Yored Hashem had less rishas. We hate the Eden less. But even a little bit of hatred is enough to get those Makkahs. Can kommen als eine kleinere Mossine rishas. Those Makkahs could come even if it's a smaller level of hatred and rishas. But those that they had the Yored Var Hashem. The Yored Var Hashem maybe had it. And the fighters said, ich werd der Meinish from the Makkahs. That's why he also deserved the punishment of the other Makkahs. From the other Makkahs, we don't know that these guys were also as bad in their rishas and their hatred like the others. Now, viele Makkahs Becheres, was a shame given Einish Misa Hareg, even Makkahs Becheres, which was death. So the Chura here, we don't find that the Yored Var Hashem did not suffer. So here it also shows that the Yored Var Hashem was as bad in their hatred like the rest. It's no Raya. Rasha said before, it says in Posik that even the b'cher of the maids, of the slaves, other slaves in Mitzrayim, not Yidden, also suffered from Makas B'cheres. Question is why? So one of the reasons that the Mitzrayim made the Yidden work, they were themselves in jail. Why would they die? So Rashi says, Lama Lok B'nei HaShvachas, why even the children of the Shvachas died? Because they were also happy about it. And they were also Meshabed Yidden. The say says, this punishment of Misa, since it's not for every person, nor if I claim a tail from the Mishpacha, only for a small amount of the family, the B'cher, if the B'cher is, you need to ask for the full sterishus from the Mitzrayim. It doesn't have to come. This type of Misa, you don't have to be the full-fledged hatred in order to deserve such a punishment. The far, the Bnei HaShvachas given Bechlal D'Makeh. For sure, the Bnei HaShvachas who were happy with the Yidden Tzoros and also helped in the Shibud, they definitely were not the same level as the regular Mitzrayim. And nevertheless, they also died. Assuming that for the Makas B'cheres, you don't need the worst level of Rishis in order to get it. So therefore, from the other Makas, we have no raya that the Yorei Zvar Hashem hated the Yidden as much as the other Mitzrayim. Maybe they hated them less, and nevertheless they got the Makas. But here, with the Vernichtung for the Mitzrayim, when the Mitzrayim were punished and they died, everyone died, not one was left. That shows that even the Yorei Zvar Hashem, which we call the Kosher Mitzrayim of that generation at that time, is given beshove mamish mit alle andere Mitzrayim in sein vollster Sinn of Rishus Yidden. Und der Pfarrer ist eichen dem Einisch von Hareg. And that shows the fact that they all died, shows that they were equal to the rest, and the they also deserve to die. So it comes out from here that what the Rashi brings, Reb Shimon said, that Teif Sheb Mitzrayim Hareg is referring not to all generations. He's talking about there in Mitzrayim at that time by Kriyas Yamsuf. And Rashi brings it to answer a shaila. The shaila is, why did they deserve to die if they were not as bad as the others? And the answer is they were as bad. So Shimon says, yes, these good guys, these good guys were very bad, equal to them. So even they Hareg, they also had to get killed. But them is verstandig for was kosher Sheb Mitzrayim Hareg. That's why Rashi, now we understand why Rashi brings these words. Kosher, the best of the Mitzrayim, we shall kill. Rashi brings it to verantworten die Schwierigkeit in dem Posik. Rashi brings it to answer the kasha in this Posik. So if Rashi is answering the kasha in this Posik, versteht man bepashtes, so that we understand, as kosher Sheb Mitzrayim Hareg, meint die Mitzrayim von jenem Dor. When he brings the Shimon as pshat in our Posik, and we know the Klal Rashi doesn't bring halachas for other cases when it's not engaged to pshat, must be what Rashi brings is pshat here. So when Rashi brings that Shimon said kosher Mitzrayim Hareg means the best Mitzri of that generation of the Posik. Wegen welches Retzich and Posik, that's talking about the Posik. As jene Mitzri, I feel that the kosher from they kommt der Einisch von Hareg. That in those Mitzrayim, even the kosher, the good ones, also deserve the punishment of Hareg, that they should die. Umitama now. And for the reason that we said before, because they also hated the Yidden as much as everybody else. And we see that from here. So Rashi brings it as talking about the Mitzrayim of that generation. And wegen the Mitzrayim von anderen Daten, Saik Sheim, Saik Shoim, Red Rashi Bechlal, and the Mitzrayim of other generations, whether good or bad, Rashi is not even talking about it. And that's self-understood. Any person that also Rashi, the way the Rebbe learns that only negated to this pasuk, so whatever Rashi says is negated to this pasuk. So when Rashi says Kosher Shem Mitzrayim Hareg is not talking about other Mitzrayim in generations later. That every best Mitzri you have to kill, even the best Mitzri. He's talking about this pasuk. And this pasuk is about Mitzrayim here. And here we have the Kosher Shem Mitzrayim, the good ones, those that were Yorei Dvar Hashem. And they also got killed. Hareg, because they also deserve to die. That's what he's saying. Frekta by the Ben Chomesh, and the child who's learning it, asks from the Loshen, from the words of Rashi. Mikan hoyer Reb Shimon Eimer. From here, Reb Shimon said, mashma der Inyan is echt negei for anders. For the Shpetedike data is mashma that he's not only explaining pshat in what happened here, pshat and pos in this pos. He's already using it mikan. From here, he said it for something else, for something later, for other generations. The ma'inaf kemin for the andere data is those was the kosher of Mitzrayim in Yenem Doris Hareg. What's negei later generations that they in that time. That generation, the best Mitzri was also bad and deserves to die. But he said it, you should take this as a lesson, mikan, from here to something else. The I bring Rashi dem Hemshech von Reb Shimon Maimer. That's what Rashi brings, the Hemshech of what Reb Shimon said, Teivshim, the Choshim, that says it's Meichi. The best of the snake bashes brain in. But the meat daiter on, this is trying to show, I did not come in the data, this is not the rinya from Kosher Shim Mitzrayim Areguf. It's not the guy, but the words that he said, the best mitzri you have to kill. That's not for the later generations. No, he didn't say that. Nor if viful or dead in your lentuns benegay them klau, teivshim and the choshim and the. From here we know concerning what comes to a snake. And so Rashi is trying to tell us why the Reb Shimon says in such a loshen mikan, because there is something that we can learn out from here, Lagabe, how much you have to take care of the snake, you have to kill the snake and break his head, his brain. That from there we learn out. The Eid Lahesif, and another thing the Rebbe says we could add, Erfun, we can't base von Eich, as Eibes wird sein, einer, was wird ziehen, Lerot, Eden, wird sein, Azab, was man wird ihm kennen, Anrufen, Nochosh, as Muzik in them. Learn out from here, Takazeh. Not that every mitzvah has to shalom, say every stomach, good mitzvah you have to kill. But he's trying to tell us, if there will be others later on, similar to the way the people were in the time of the story of Kriyas Yamsuf, if another mitzvah, or another goy, his connection to Eden will be in such a way like a snake. What's a snake? A snake that is muhzik in them. A snake is muhzik means we have the chazaka. We know he is dangerous. He is out to kill you. Al derech v'im gefintel mal yus hashim shemeton gebruf nochash. All nochash means nochash is a snake, but it's used when you say somebody who has a chazaka to a certain thing. We find good also. Shimshon was called a nochash. Why? Because he was very strong in his inyanim and the good things. And then you have Nochash, the snake, that says bad. So Reb Shimon is telling us, if you'll have other times, generations, similar to this generation, where you have people who have a chazokeh like a snake, that they're going to harm you, gate of them, their klal, teivshim and nechoshim chulu, the klal, the best Nochash you should kill. And that we learn out from the story here. So Rashi, when he says, teivshim kosher shemitzrayim arei, goes on those generations. And not generation, the time of Kriyas Yamsuf. From there we learn out for a snake, and also for people who are like a snake, then you'll have to do the same thing as the Eibusha did here, that the best mitzvah the Eibusha killed. For the Hoyer, that says just to note, as in Rashes, seine Talmidim Zeit, in Rashes, and his Talmidim's time, is given a Sach was einen given zu Eden bedugmas Nochash. A lot of going with Eden like a Nochash. The Mizet Seichen, the Kinnes geschrieben von Rashi with Talmidim. We see the Kinnes that we say even on Tisha B'Av. Other Kinnes that Rashi wrote and the Talmidim wrote, describing the hatred of the Goyim and how they made the Eden suffer. So Rashi wrote it because people in his generation have to know that sometimes it could be some similar situation that you have to do like the Eibush did to the Mitzrayim by Kriyas Yamsuf to the good ones. You have to do it here too, and you can't trust them because they're like a Nochash. This will also answer what's the big chidush that the best of the snakes you should bash his brain out. The best, it's a posik. It says who yishuv charesh, that he, meaning the person, the human being, will break his head, hit him in his head. So the Rebbe says like this: from the posik who yishuv charesh vata the shoena. Okay, from this posik that he will harm you in your head and you will bite him in his ankle, in his heel. Veisman nor as yishuv charesh. Is verbunden is abavorin started to show okay. That we know it's a connection. That if he wants to bite you, then you break his head. To schmetten dem reish von Nochash, dann when is bematzefat the shvaneke. You should break completely. I don't know the English word for it actually. Only when he is trying to bother you, then you have to do it. If them is Reb Shimon Mechadesh, Reb Shimon comes and says, "Punkt, we gefind as afilo dikshein shebe Mitzrayim is a lake, harek." Just like we find by the Mitzrayim, that the best mitzvah you should kill. So Reb Zeya giftig esinit to Eden because the same good ones, so to speak, had the greatest hatred to Eden with the greatest venom. On need to Reb Zeya mechama on follow Eden, not because they came to fight with Eden. Now, as we explained before, what happened here is not because they came to fight. Why did Ayored Bar Hashem die? Because they hated Eden the whole time. So to by a snake, but the Eibush made a decree that there will be a hatred between the people and the Nochash. Darfon nicht warten, bis der Nochash fällt on if a mention. Up to wait till Nochash will attack a person. Und damals Yishuv Charesh, then you should smash his head. Vergleich with the Zet an Nochash. As soon as you see a snake, it says to smash his brain. Because even the good Nochash, good snake, is a zevi akoshesh mitzrayim from their parsha for Yanavdor. Every good snake is similar to the good Mitzri in the generation of Kriyas Yamsu. He is dein sakonis dikasene. He is your enemy with danger the whole time. For Eva Oshes, the Abish says he'll hate you. The Abish made a decree. So a snake, you don't have to wait; he should attack you. But that we don't know from the pasuk, and that we know from here. From that we know what's doing by a snake. So a lot of times we have something that teaches something someplace else. But when we get to that someplace else, and we try to compare number one to number two. Then after we know number two is like number one, it goes backwards. Now we learn certain details from number two to number one. Here also. And the fact that Rashi brings the end, that by the snake also you should bash his brain out. Now it makes it clear to understand what Rashi meant in the first part, that the good Mitzri you have to kill. It only means the generation of Mitzrayim, was mit sehr Sinne zu iten sein, sie gewähnen der Dugme zu der Sinne von anochischen Menschen, that they were that time similar to a snake, even nowadays. By Rashi bringing the snake, that adds another point. He's not only to bring that we should learn out from here what to do by a snake. Again, there'll be a question. If he's just teaching us, we learn out that by a snake you always have to kill the snake. Again, it's not pshat in this pasuk. The truth is, when Rashi brings that, it strengthens the pshat in the pasuk. That since we compare the snake to the kosher Sheba Mitzrayim, and by a snake we know that the reason you have to kill him and smash his head in is because of his gift, because of his venom, and that's what we learn out from the kosher Sheba Mitzrayim. Oh, from that we understand that we're talking in a case where the best goy has the same venom. And where was that? Only in the time of Mitzrayim. Or if ever another generation will be the same thing, that even the good guys have the venom. So now we see the whole Tash from all sides. Was ist Tage die Sibbe, was Punkt Demelt ist given as a grace, as a Usnam Dor? Why Take, what the Rebbe says? What's the reason why it was such a special, extra special generation in a bad way, of that generation, that they hated the Eden so much? Them is Rashi Medayek, Arab to bring them Loshen from Mechilte. That's why Rashi is Medayek, and he quotes the Loshen of Mechilte, Tev, Shebe Mechoshim, Letzeitz Es Meichei. Bash his brain in. And the kasha we asked in the beginning, why is brain? Rashi should have used the word reish, because it says Yishafan reish. So Rashi brings Meichei to explain the first part, that the best Mitzri at that time also had the same venom, which means that when Rashi quotes Reb Shimon, that from here we learn now, Tev Akosha Mitzrayim Hareg means only the Mitzrayim at that generation. How do we know that more? Is by Rashi bringing here the word Meichei. Rashi, by bringing Meichei, by bringing something to teach us by a snake, but from that we understand the pshat in the case of Mitzrayim. And this will answer why they had such hatred, and we'll explain that when the Shimon says, and Rashi quotes Shimon, that the best Mitzri you have to kill means of that generation. How is it? Kishem by Nochish is a sibit to the Gzeira by Eva Oshes. Is given dos as a Nochish Yoram. Look at the snake. Why did Abish to make that there should be a hatred between a human being and a snake? Because of what the snake did. When the snake with the Itzadas. How did the snake do it? Starts off a Nochish Yoram. Meichei. He was sly. The snake was sly. Was they saw their phone, he was sly in his brain. As a result, is gekommen der Chet Itzadas. Came the Chet Itzadas. Azeh ateh the sinne von dem Mitzrim. He had in ihr besondere Sibbe, so the same thing by the Mitzrayim, the sinne that they had a reason. Und der Fall ist unvergleichbare Sinne, and such a unprecedented hatred. How did it start? In dem was Pare had gesagt, Hovan is Chachman. Pare started, he said, let's go find Chochme against the Eden. Alle Mitzrayim sollen sein is Chachma. All the Mitzrayim should become smart. And what does it mean, Orum? Like by the snake was Orum. Orum is sly. But those are gefiert to Kusha Shibut meaning from the Israel. That made the Shibut so hard and the suffering of the Eden. Und das is Rashi Merames in the word Meicha, you need Rashi. That's what Rashi says, that by the snake, you have to break his brain. The Nochash darf man umbringen zu Lib Zaymeach. Why do you have to destroy the Nochash, the snake? Because of his brain. A Nochash Ayorim, it all started because of the brain of the Nochash. He was sly. But so their fears of Evosh, that brought to the hatred. That's why the fact that the best Mitzri you have to kill in the time of Mitzrayim then is because also of their brain, of their Chochmeh. Their Hovan is Chachmalei, when they said, let's make ourselves smart against the Eden. So their fear, it's Keisha Shibut Mitzrayim, which brought to the hardship of the Shibut and the suffering of Mitzrayim. So now we even understand that. But now we have a kosher and the general shot. Von is the Raya, das was mir geharget, dem kosher Shem Mitzrayim is given to jeden Sinne in Rishus. How do we know that everyone, all the Mitzrayim died, that even the ones that were Yored Var Hashem died? Is because, as we said, they had the same unbelievable hatred and Rishus to Eden. After das given the Agzera von Eberschen Onatam Golim. Maybe the Eberschen had his reason. How do you know that this is the reason? The Eberschen made Agzeras. A lot of times the Eberschen does things that we don't understand. How do we know we're making it a whole cheshbon that they died because of that, etc., etc.? How do we know that? Maybe there's no real reason. But we know it's no Goldic reason. The Eberschen had his reason. I bring Rasha up the name from Bala Memre Reb Shimon. That's what Rasha brings, the one who said this, Reb Shimon. While Reb Shimon is there, was his daughter's time at the crow, and the gate acknowledged it. Reb Shimon is known to be, he's the one that darshans, psukim, and according to the reason. Even halachas, he says, when the Torah gives a reason, so he says the reason is when we keep the halach, if there's a case where that reason doesn't apply, the halacha doesn't apply. Others don't agree. Even the Torah gives a reason, we don't darshan it as the main thing of the din. But Reb Shimon does. So here also, Reb Shimon, he says, yeah, we have to look into the tam. And therefore, if this is a tam that makes sense, this is the tam why they were died. And from then, and that we see that in the case, other cases like this, like by the Nochash, or in the case where there are Yidden, Goyim, other case, other data that do the same thing, you have to do the same. But what Rasha is doing, not trying to make something, other case, it's only Geya to teach us what the Pshat in this passage. The dem is moving for us in the alle the kuchen bescheiches the Maimon from the Shimon with their Mond, hat man sich nicht gekannt, but nutzen wir das Wort. The Kasha the Rebbe asked in the beginning, if we're going to explain Rasha very simple, why couldn't the Daily Yisrael answer this in all the dialogues they had with the Goyim? So that now we'll understand it. The Bir HaOmer is poshet behechlet. This Bir, the Rebbe said, is very simple. The Rebbe is simple. Rashi doesn't have to say it. It's obvious. It is aber masim nor in Pirish Rashi. You could only say Pshat in Rashi. While number one, Rashi is listen to Mafarish and nor Pshuta Shel Mikra. Nor the posik welcher stellt sich. Rashi only explains Pshuta Shel Mikra and the posik that he's explaining. The far is in Pirish Rashi the Taich v'kosher sheba Mitzrayim the Mitzrayim wegen welches redt sich in dem posik. So when Rashi says the kosher sheba Mitzrayim areik, since Rashi is only dealing with this posik, so it's obvious that the word Mitzrayim here means the Mitzrayim of that posik, the Mitzrayim of that time. And that's one thing. Number two, in Pirish Rashi kommt how do we understand Rashi? One of the ways that Rashi is talking about the Mitzrayim of that generation, so we said before, because Rashi continues that by the snake, the same thing, and that teaches us to understand that we're talking about the Mitzrayim here who had a great venom like the snakes. But the fire by that's why by the gate and the Choshim, how much you have to do it, is learn out from here. Main place in Mitzrayim. And that proved, as we said before, that when Rasha says the best Mitzri you should kill, means the Mitzrayim and the Goyim of that generation. But that's only Rasha. When you bring Reb Shimon to the Sefer or other Madrashim, where the Nusach is in Asik and Stomi, there is not talking about the Mitzrayim of that generation. It's Tam. Tony Reb Shimon said that the best Goy you should kill. The best of snakes you shall bash his brain in. The best woman does magic. So when you learn there, you can't explain that it's talking about the Mitzrayim of the Goyim of that generation. It doesn't talk about a generation, certain generation. It doesn't talk about a special type of Goyim, Mitzrayim. So in Rashi, it's clear it's talking about the Mitzrayim then, for two reasons. Number one, because Rashi is only explaining this passage. So if it's on this passage, we're talking about these Mitzrayim. And number two, Rashi, the hemsha to that, says by the Nechosha what you should do, as we said before. But when it says Tamim Sichta Sefer, we can't say that. Another thing why you can't say it in Sichta Sefer. Here there's, as we said just now, there's a third case. The best woman does Kishef. Was that has no connection to the best of the Goyim. Darf man sagen, jede eine von die drei Bobbits ist eine besondere Inje für sich. So man sieht das off from since the third one, which is the Ksheder Shebenoshim is Kshofim, has nothing to do to the ones before. Oh, so obviously there's three statements. Each one is an independent statement. Haksheder Shebenoshim v'chul is ahiroi shaychas mit dem tebe v'noshim. When it says the best woman could be K'mad Kshofim is a hero concerning women. What's the nature of women? Tev sheben nechashim is the teva from nechashim. The best of the snakes is concerning what's the nature of the snakes. Beide nicht verbunden mit einem bestimmten Dor. And both have nothing to do with a specific time, specific generation. For alle Zeiten in Sheiches mit der Teva von Agoy. So when it says Masechta Sofer and Shimon says that the best goy you should kill, is also telling us the nature of a goy, nothing to do with a special generation. So the Bchil Beparis or the others who had the dialogues with the goyim could not answer this pshat. We're just answering it in Rashi, but there you need a different answer, and therefore that's why they had a hard time trying to find the answer that will be acceptable by them. So as much as we said this pshat is poshut, very simple, we understand also the pashtas why they couldn't answer it, because only poshut in Rashi, not otherwise. Then the Rebbe continues. The Geret kama pomen kema for Rashi al Atera Ruslernen the kama v'kama mekema sechenyonim zayin in the gate mechilek halacha shabatera. Even though Rashi is pshat, but Rashi is not a sefer of halachas, but we could learn out from Rashi things which have to do with halacha. So he says, "Vegnazeh bechulav anochas dokter belozer sanhedrin." Sanhedrin Rabbi Eliezer says concerning a wolf or a snake, he says like this: Kol akedem lahirgon zochad. Anybody who kills him first is zeich. In other words, as soon as you see a snake, you got to kill him. Tanakama there says that when the ox kills a person, you got to kill the ox, but you got to have a bezdin. Mamish, as if you take a person to trial, capital trial, same thing with an ox. But it comes to the wolf or a snake, he says, no, you don't need the bezdin of 23 like by a person. Tanakama says you do by a snake also, and Rabbi Lezer says you're not. When the dem is do a pluk that's zwischen Rabbi Yechon and the Shlokish. In Pshat, in Rabbi Eliezer, that you don't need a bezdin to kill a snake, there's a machlokes with Rabbi Yechon and Shlokish. Shlokish haltet, das ist gesagt geworden, nur wenn der Nochish hat getäter Menschen. The Shlokish says, when does Rabbi Lezer say you don't need a bezdin, but you could kill him, the snake yourself, is when the snake killed a person. But then will come to me, says, so he deserves to die. So then he says, darfen, nicht darfen. Them, come bezdin, you don't need a bezdin. Die es fordert sich bei Asher, by an ox who killed and deserves to die, you need a bezdin, by a snake you don't. If you didn't kill anybody, you can't kill the snake. But Rabbi Yechanan says, Rabbi Yechanan says what he meant was, even if you didn't kill anybody, a snake is wild and the snake is dangerous. And therefore, if you see a snake, you kill him no matter what. But based on what we said before, that Rashi explains in Pshat, that when we say the best snake you should kill is learned out mikan from the case of kosher sheba Mitzrayim Mareget, the best mitzvah you should kill. Und divre Rashi ala teire darfen doch geteicht werden l'chelereish kipshutem. And Rashi, first you got to teach Rashi in simple Pshat. So if you learn like that, daf oiskumen, this will come out in halacha. Even though Rashi is not intending to say halacha, but it's there. Number one, I'm a darfen hom kemishpat the best net hargem nochish. First of all, he passing like Rabbi Eliezer, not like the Tanakama. You don't need a judgment. You don't need a trial for the Nochash. If we compare the Nochash to the Mitzrim, and we're talking about the Mitzrim of that generation, the Eibusha didn't judge each Mitzri separately. So we see that you don't have to judge him. But Demelt is the Seder, if you have to judge, the Seder would have been the Shofta Eida B'Tzilo Eida. The Torah says you got to judge and you got to save. You got to find the schus. Und da seine gehargert geworden, was Yore is about Hashem, bis ad echot. And hereby we see it, everyone killed, even the good guys. Yore Dvar Hashem got killed with other judgments. So number one, we see that Allah is like in Pshat, according to Pshat, Allah is like Rabbi Eliezer, not like the Hanakam. You don't need the best. Nor the Gzeira Skloya Tarum Gunum alle Mitzrayim ubevas begeder midachas. The Gzeira of killing the Mitzrayim was by everybody equal. So the good ones also without the bezin. And number two, in the Eliezer Gufa, we see Amedar Hargen and Anochash Afilu Kishalayim. So like the Shlokish says, no, like Rabbi Yechanan says, no, like Rabbi Yechanan says that you have to kill him no matter what. For Mafil Atev Sheben Nechoshim, it says here, it says even the good Nochash. What does the good Nochash mean? If he's biting you, then obviously he's not a good Nochash. It means he's not biting you. Al derechli bakosha Shem Mitzrayim Areik, when we say comparing the Nochash, a good Nochash to the good Mitzri, was is given nicht zu lieb sein Milchama mit Eden, when we say that the good guys got killed by Kriyas Yamsuf, it's not because of the attacking the Eden, because of their sin, as we said. And that is there by a Nochash also. So a Nochash you could kill just for his sin without even attacking you. And the third thing we see was alt is nor b'shaychas to a Nochash. It's only according to this Rashi, it's only by a snake. Then the Eibishter made the decree that he hates you. So the snake, we know, hates the person. By other animals from Rashi, we don't see. Maybe they are able to be tamed, etc., etc. So we see three things in halacha. The way the halacha will come out according to Pshuta Shel Mikra. The Rof and then Vayeder Eden Zayin Aveda Prot is the lesson that we take for every Yid in his personal service Aveda of Hashem. Chazal zogen as Nochash the Yitzhara. The Chazal say to tell us in Zayir, it says Nochash represents the Yitzhara. Namol is the Afruma Yitzhara. Sometimes you have a religious Yitzhara. A good Nochash, so to speak. At Tainet, what's a good Nochash? What is the Yitzhara? One could be a good Yitzhara. How could the Yitzhara be good? Yeah, he could say, as I will machen sholem mit the Yitzhara, he wants to make peace with the Yitzhara. Let's make a compromise. Ervet losen the Mieden lernen Teire, v'chulu bisman Teire, v'chulu. Because I won't bother you. When you learn Teire, learn Teire, I'm going to let you do it. And they say, hey, Yitzhara soll ihm losen sich noch geben ein bisschen seine Teives. And he tells the Yitzhara, you know what? I'll let the Yidden learn Teire at certain time when you should learn. And other times, you let me get the guy involved in Teives. When you eat, etc. That's my business. Let's make it short. So he's a good Yetzer Hara. He's trying to give in a little bit to the Yetzer Tov. So the Reb Shimon says, Teiv Sheben Nechoshim, the best snake, you have to bash his brain in. You're not allowed to make peace with the Yetzer Hara, but that is a Nochosh, because the Yetzer Hara is a Nochosh. What does it mean? Nohot dir find. No matter how he disguises himself, he hates you. And those was it is great. The fact that he's trying to give in certain things, it's part of his tricks of the Yitzhara. Like the Gemara says, that the Yitzhara has a plan. He says in the beginning, he gives in. But he gets you used to certain things. And then eventually he'll get you to the worst. So this is only a plan. So he has his meyach, he's using his brain to catch you in. So he looks like a good Yitzhara. He's trying to make peace. But you don't believe it. And the far is the Eitzah, so what's the advice? Bash his brain in. To schmettern sein Meach. Bash his brain. The armumius v'tachbulus from Yitzhara, the slyness and the trickness of the Yitzhara, that he's trying to trick you. No, I need them another Indian. So you do the dig and then vashteit yigir kapech asechel. We know there's a dig. The pasuk says you shall eat from the toil of your hands. What do you mean toil of your hands? So the Rebbe says in many different sichas. That means when you work hard in panosa, making a living, you have to do it. But it has to be only with your hands. With your keach of action. Your head, the seichel, your brain involvement in your brain, that always be full Torah. Nobody, you got to do what you got to do, and you got to know what you're doing. Obviously, it doesn't mean you got to do stupid things. But you have to, if what's leak the cup, what's your head involved, always has to be in Torah. And that means bash his brain in. You have to break the brain of the Yetzer Hara, which is the Nochash. Today, their Meach soll sein in ganz niedrigem zu Torah and Kedusha, so the brain should be given completely to Torah and Kedusha. And durch them, was sieht in seinem Mekayim Eros Razal, Teivshem and Choshim Letzeitzas Meichai. The Yidden keep what the Chazal say, the best of the snakes bash his brain in, which means the Yetzer Hara. Don't give in to the Yetzer Hara at all. In Meshach Zman HaGolus, if you do it during the time of Golus, in Zeicha to the Kima Yud, from Gam Evav Yashim Itei, we will reach the fulfillment of the promise of the Eibishter that even your enemy will make peace with you. Now, who's that enemy? The Chazal's Taichen, Zeha Nochash. The Chazal say this in Yerushalmi, that goes on the snake. As Eich the Nochash, when even the snake will be changed over, transformed, this as Yashli Mitel make Shalom with you. And a real Shalom, not the Shalom that he's trying to make compromises. He will give in, and he will give in completely. It will be only Tov and Kedusha.